The wind howled through the broken walls of the old stone house. Faded banners hung like silent ghosts torn from past battles. Inside, the room was cold and dim, lit only by the pale glow of the twin moons outside. Lyra sat on the floor near the cradle, her legs folded under her and her eyes fixed on the small space where her baby used to sleep. Her voice was soft as she sang an old lullaby. The sound trembled in the empty air as if even the walls were listening. Her baby was gone. Taken from her arms during the human raid 3 weeks ago. One moment she had been holding her warm and breathing. The next moment the soldiers had torn her away, shouting words Lyra could not understand. She had run after them until her legs gave up. The only thing she had left now was the little cradle and the lullaby her mother once sang to her. Every night she sang it again. She told herself her baby might hear it across the stars. Lyra's people had stopped coming to visit. At first they brought her food, soft blankets, kind words, but as days passed and no baby returned, they began to whisper that she had lost her mind. Some said she should stop singing, stop waiting, stop hoping, but Lyra could not stop. If she stopped singing, it would mean she had given up, and she could not give up, not while she could still feel the shape of her daughter's tiny fingers curled inside her memory. Her hands were thin now from hunger. Her voice cracked sometimes from crying, yet every night when the moons rose, she sang again. Her lullaby floated through the ruins like a fragile thread holding her heart together. She sang of quiet rivers and silver trees. She sang of stars watching over sleeping children. She sang until her tears ran down her face and onto the wooden cradle, where dust had settled like a shroud. She did not sleep much anymore. Sleep brought dreams of soldiers tearing through the night, of her baby crying somewhere far away, so she stayed awake and rocked the empty cradle gently back and forth. The creak of the wood mixed with her song, slow and steady like a heartbeat. The house smelled of ashes and dried flowers. It had once been full of laughter. Now it was full of silence. Outside, the wind grew stronger. It rattled the broken shutters. A loose stone rolled across the floor. Lyra did not move. Her voice rose a little louder, trying to drown the noises of the night. She wanted her baby to hear her if she was still alive. She wanted the stars to carry her song to wherever her child had been taken. She whispered her baby's name between verses, as if the name itself was a spell that could call her home. Suddenly the song caught in her throat. She thought she heard something, a sound that did not belong to the wind or the creaking house. She held her breath. The cradle stopped moving. The room was silent again, but Lyra's heart pounded hard against her ribs. Slowly she stood, her long shadow stretching across the wall. She listened. Nothing. Just the cold sigh of the night pressing against the door. She told herself it was nothing and sat back down. Her hands shook as she picked up the lullaby again, softer this time. She sang to the darkness, her voice thin but steady. Her eyes stayed on the cradle, but her ears strained toward the door. The sound came again, faint and distant. A soft crunch of footsteps on broken stone. Real footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming closer. The hairs on her arms rose. Fear slid down her spine like ice. Raiders. Maybe they had come back to burn what little she had left. She rose again and stepped between the cradle and the door. She wrapped her thin fingers around a broken metal rod lying on the floor. It was rusty and bent, but it was all she had. Her voice stopped. The house went still as stone. Outside, the steps grew louder. A shape moved in the crack beneath the door. A shadow stretched across the floorboards. Lyra tightened her grip on the rod. Her heart thumped so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. The door's latch rattled. Then silence. The shadow paused as if listening to her breathing. Lyra stood frozen, eyes wide, breath shallow. The cradle stood behind her like a silent witness. The wind pushed gently at the door and it creaked inward. Cold moonlight spilled into the room and stretched toward her feet. In that pale light she saw the edge of a tall figure standing just beyond the threshold, silent and still. Her mind screamed to run, but her feet stayed planted. She raised the rod with trembling hands. The figure did not move. For a long heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then from outside, a faint sound broke the silence. The soft whimper of an infant. Lyra's heart stopped. The soft whimper echoed like a thread of light through the dark. Lyra froze. For a moment, she thought her broken mind was playing tricks on her again. But then she heard it once more, quiet and weak, but real. It came from beyond the half-open door. Her fingers loosened around the metal rod, then tightened again. Fear battled hope inside her chest. The tall shadow stood still in the doorway, outlined by moonlight. It looked human, Broad shoulders, long arms, and heavy boots. Humans had taken her baby. Humans had destroyed her home. Every muscle in her body screamed to attack, to drive it away. Yet the sound she had heard was not the sound of war. It was the tiny voice of a baby trying to cry. Her heart ached so sharply she could hardly breathe. She stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. The figure stirred slightly. Its head turned toward her. A faint glimmer of silver cloth caught the moonlight. Something was cradled in its arms, wrapped tight. Lyra's throat tightened. The shape was small, the size of an infant. Her hands shook. She lifted the metal rod, ready to swing if it was a trick. The figure raised one hand slowly, palm open to show it carried no weapon. The other arm held the bundle close to its chest. Lyra could not see a face, only the glint of pale eyes hidden under a hood. "Stay back," she hissed, her voice thin with fear. The figure stopped. Its voice was low and rough, carrying across the cold air like gravel. "I will not hurt you." She flinched at the human language, but the tone held no threat. It sounded tired, almost broken. Her eyes darted to the bundle. The cloth shifted. A small hand slipped out, delicate, pale, with tiny curling fingers. Lyra's heart leapt painfully. That hand was burned into her memory. She knew every line of it. She dropped the rod. It clattered on the floor. She stumbled forward, tears rising in her eyes. The figure stepped inside the room slowly, like approaching a wild animal. He knelt and held out the bundle. The cloth moved again and a soft cry escaped from inside it. Lyra fell to her knees in front of him. She reached out trembling hands and pulled back the cloth. Her breath caught. Two wide golden eyes blinked up at her. The little face she had seen in every dream stared back at her. Her baby, alive, thin and weak but alive. A sound tore from her throat, half sob, half laugh. She gathered the child into her arms, pressing her cheek against the soft skin. Warmth flooded through her like fire after a long winter. Her daughter gave a faint cry, then went quiet, as if recognizing the heartbeat against her ear. Lyra rocked her gently, tears falling onto the baby's tiny forehead. She looked up, ready to ask how, why, anything. But the figure had stepped back. He stood near the door, silent, watching her. The moonlight caught his face now. A human man with rough skin, hollow cheeks, and tired eyes. There was blood on his jacket. He looked like someone who had walked through fire to get here. "Why?" she whispered. He did not answer. His gaze stayed on the baby, and for a moment something like grief crossed his face. Then he turned away. "Wait," Lyra said, her voice cracking. "How did you find her?" The man paused at the doorway but still said nothing. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of the world pressed on them. Then he stepped into the night. Lyra rose quickly, clutching her baby close. She stumbled to the door, but when she looked out, he was already gone. Only the wind moved across the ruins, scattering dust under the pale moons. Her baby stirred in her arms. Lyra closed the door and sank to the floor. She kissed her daughter's small head over and over. The baby smelled faintly of smoke and strange herbs, but she was real and warm. Lyra wrapped her in soft blankets, her hands shaking as she touched each finger and each tiny toe to make sure she was whole. She fed her warm milk from the last bottle she had saved. The baby drank slowly, eyes fluttering shut. Lyra hummed her lullaby through tears. This time the cradle was no longer empty. She laid the child down gently and tucked her in. The moons painted silver light across her small sleeping form. Lyra sat beside the cradle, her heart full and heavy. Questions swirled in her mind. Why would a human return her baby? Why risk everything? And why had his eyes looked so full of sorrow when he saw them together? Her gaze drifted to the door. Outside, the night whispered over broken stones. Somewhere out there, the human walked alone under the twin moons. He had carried her baby through fire and shadow, only to disappear without a word. Lyra touched her baby's cheek and whispered softly, "Who are you, human? And why did you save her?" The first light of dawn slipped through the cracked roof as Lyra opened her eyes. She had not really slept. She had only watched her baby all night, afraid she might vanish again if she blinked. Tiny breaths rose and fell from the cradle. The child's little hands twitched softly in her dreams. Lyra smiled through the ache in her chest. She had her daughter back. Yet her heart would not rest. The image of the human haunted her mind. The way he had stood in the doorway like a shadow carved from the night. The way his eyes had softened for one fleeting second when he saw them together. He had not spoken a single answer. He had left without a name, without a reason, but he had carried her baby back through danger when no one else had tried. That mystery burned inside her like a slow fire. Her people had told her to let go. They had told her the child was lost forever. They had turned away from her grief, yet a human stranger had done what her own kind would not. The thought made her chest tighten. She looked at her baby, who stirred and opened her golden eyes. Lyra bent close and kissed her soft forehead. "You are safe now," she whispered. "I promise." But promises meant nothing if the world was still full of men who could take her again. And somewhere out there, the man who had saved her walked alone, maybe bleeding, maybe hunted. Lyra could not understand why, but she felt the pull to find him. If he risked his life for her child, he deserved more than to vanish into dust. She wrapped her baby in warm cloth and tied her to her chest. The little one dozed with her cheek against Lyra's heart. Lyra stood, legs trembling but steady. She pushed open the old wooden door. Cold morning air swept in, carrying the smell of ashes and wildflowers. The world outside was quiet and broken. The ruins stretched out like the bones of a dead giant. Blackened walls, twisted metal, hollow homes. Human boot prints still marked the soil near her door. She knelt and studied them. They were large and deep, showing weight and long strides. One set led away from her house, vanishing into the dry riverbed beyond the shattered gate. Lyra followed. Each step filled her with fear. She was walking toward the people who had taken her child. She had no weapon, no plan, but something fierce had awakened in her. A part of her that had died the night her baby was stolen was alive again, burning bright. She kept one hand on her daughter, feeling her warmth, drawing courage from every tiny breath. Hours passed as the sun climbed. The trail wound through cracked fields and broken towers. Lyra saw the signs of battle. Melted stone, shattered shields, scorched ground where fire machines had stood. The air still carried the faint sting of burned metal. She heard voices before she saw them. Human voices, harsh and sharp, echoing from the ruins ahead. She pressed herself against a fallen pillar and peeked. A small human camp lay hidden in the rubble. Makeshift tents of gray cloth, crates of supplies, guns leaning against walls. Men and women in dark armor sat around a fire speaking in low tones. Her heart thumped hard. If they saw her, they would kill her or take her baby again. She crouched lower, staying in shadow. Her eyes scanned the camp. And then she saw it. A blood-stained jacket draped over a crate. The same one the man had worn. He had been here. She searched for him among the soldiers, but he was not there. One of the humans stood and pointed toward the hills, speaking fast. The others nodded. A word rose above their voices. A name. Elias. Lyra whispered it under her breath. Elias. So he had a name. The soldiers packed their gear and left in a group, heading toward the hills. When they were gone, Lyra crept into the camp. She moved silently between the crates. Her daughter stirred once but stayed asleep. Lyra's hand shook as she touched the jacket. It was cold and stiff with dried blood. She found a small leather satchel beside it. Inside was a broken music box. She turned the tiny key and it played a few soft notes before stopping. The melody was the same tune she sang every night. Her heart squeezed. Had Elias known that song? How could a human know an ancient alien lullaby? She felt the weight of his grief in every bent gear of the music box. He had saved her baby, yet he carried sorrow like a second skin. She pressed the box to her chest and stood. She had a name now, and a direction. She walked away from the camp, following the path the soldiers had taken. The sun dipped lower behind her. Long shadows stretched across the ruins. Lyra tightened the wrap around her baby and whispered, "Hold on, little one. We are going to find the man who brought you back." Her voice was steady, though her heart was racing. She did not know what awaited them beyond the hills. Danger, perhaps. Death, maybe. But also answers. And Lyra needed answers more than fear could stop her. The hills rose like jagged teeth against the fading sky. Lyra walked through the dry grass, her baby tied to her chest, feeling the slow beat of her daughter's heart against her own. Each step was heavy, but she did not stop. She followed the trail of human boots pressed into the earth, still fresh from the soldiers she had seen. Somewhere ahead, Elias was out there. She whispered his name like a secret spell, hoping the wind would carry it to him. The land beyond the ruins was strange. Thin black trees twisted toward the sky like reaching claws. Cracked roads cut through empty plains where no birds sang. Lyra had never gone this far before. Her people warned her that human settlements were places of cages and fire, yet fear no longer ruled her. The man who had returned her child was human, and he had defied those places. She had to know why. As the sun sank, she reached the edge of a human outpost. Metal fences rose from the dust, topped with coils of wire. Dim lights flickered on tall poles. Inside, rows of gray tents crowded together like tombstones. The air smelled of oil and old smoke. Human voices drifted through the cold evening air, low and sharp. Lyra crouched behind a rusted vehicle shell. Her baby stirred but did not cry. She pulled her cloak tighter around them and watched the outpost carefully. Armed guards walked in circles. Their armor gleamed dull under the lights. Beyond the fences, more humans moved between the tents, carrying boxes, shouting orders. They looked tired, angry, hollow-eyed. She waited until the guards passed and slipped closer, pressing herself flat to the ground. There was a small gap where the fence sagged near a cracked water pipe. Lyra wriggled through, biting her lip as the wire scraped her back. She slipped into the shadows of the tents. The camp was louder inside. Machinery clanked. Radios buzzed. She kept her head down and her steps soft. Her eyes searched every face. Men with scarred jaws, women with shaven heads. None of them were Elias. She found a stack of papers pinned to a board. She could not read the human language, but one sheet held a drawing. A rough sketch of a man with hollow cheeks and tired eyes. Beneath it were symbols, and she recognized one. The name she had heard. Elias. Her chest tightened. The drawing showed him with chains on his wrists. A voice rang out nearby. Harsh, commanding. Lyra ducked behind a tent flap. Two soldiers stood by a table arguing. She understood only fragments, but the tone was clear. They were angry. One slammed his fist and shouted the name again. Elias, they called him traitor, deserted, stole supplies. Freed captives, freed captives. Lyra's breath caught. So he had not only saved her baby, he had taken others too. He had betrayed his own kind for children who were not his. The soldiers grabbed rifles and marched off toward the far gate. Lyra slipped out behind them, keeping to the shadows. She followed them through narrow alleys between tents until they reached a large metal building at the edge of the camp. They went inside. Through a crack in the door, she saw rows of cages, small and cold. Inside some lay tiny alien infants, sick and silent. Her stomach twisted. Her people had been right to fear this place. Yet Elias had walked into this hell and taken her baby out. She stepped back into the night, heart pounding. She could not stay here long. If they caught her, her daughter would vanish again. But she could not leave without learning where he had gone. She spotted a lone human sitting on a crate, smoking. His uniform was ragged and his face looked young and uncertain. Lyra slipped closer, staying behind a pile of scrap metal. She picked up a small stone and tossed it ahead. It clattered against the dirt. The man turned. Lyra stepped from the shadows, pulling back her hood. Golden eyes glimmered in the dim light. The man froze, mouth open. Elias, she said softly. Where? He blinked, stunned to hear her voice. Then he pointed shakily toward the northern ridge. He whispered something fast, fear flashing across his face. She caught only one word. Hideout. Lyra nodded once. The man looked around in panic, then ran away into the tents. She stood alone under the flickering lights, her baby warm against her chest. The night smelled of oil and fear. But now she had her answer. Elias was alive. He was hiding in the northern ridge, away from the soldiers who called him traitor. She slipped back through the fence and into the open fields. The wind bit at her face, sharp and cold. Behind her, the human outpost shrank into the dark. Ahead, the ridge rose black against the stars. Lyra's legs ached, but her spirit burned. The man who had saved her baby was hunted by his own people. He had walked through cages and chains to bring her child back. She needed to know why. She needed to know the pain behind his eyes. She pressed her lips to her baby's head and whispered, "We will find him. We will learn his truth." And with the moon climbing high above her, Lyra walked into the northern night. The northern ridge rose like the spine of a sleeping beast under the pale moonlight. Sharp rocks jutted from the earth and cold winds screamed through the narrow cracks. Lyra climbed carefully, clutching her baby close. The little one stirred, then settled against her chest, warm and safe. Every step scraped her feet, but she did not slow down. Somewhere in this lonely place, the man named Elias was hiding. The man who had walked through cages to bring her child home. She found the entrance by accident. A faint glimmer of firelight flickered behind a wall of fallen stones. Smoke curled up through the cracks. Lyra pressed her ear to the stone and heard the faint creak of tools, and the slow notes of a lullaby played on something mechanical. Her heart leapt. It was the same tune she sang every night. The melody was broken and uneven, but it was her song. She slipped inside the narrow gap, her body trembling with both fear and hope. The tunnel opened into a small hollow carved into the ridge. Old blankets lay on the floor. A broken lantern cast weak light on the walls. In the center sat Elias, hunched over a small music box. His hands were cut and scarred. He worked slowly with bent tools, fitting a gear into place. He did not look up when she entered. Lyra froze, her breath caught. The man looked older than she remembered, though only a day had passed. Shadows carved deep lines into his face. His eyes were hollow yet strangely gentle, like the eyes of someone who had seen too much and kept walking anyway. Her baby let out a soft sound. Elias's head rose at once. His eyes widened when he saw them standing there. "You followed me," he said quietly. His voice was tired, rough, carrying the weight of sleepless years. "You saved her," Lyra replied. Her voice shook. "I had to know why." Elias stared at the child. For a moment, something warm flickered in his eyes. Then he sighed and set the music box aside. He leaned back against the stone wall as if all the strength had drained from him. "I once had a daughter," he said. Lyra's heart stilled. She was small, he continued softly. Bright. She laughed at everything. She danced when the wind moved the grass. And one night, when the war came, I was ordered to evacuate. I was told to leave her behind and save myself. He paused, his gaze lost in the shadows. I obeyed, he whispered. By the time I came back, the house was ash. Lyra felt the air tighten around her. I searched the ruins for days, Elias said. I found only her music box. He nodded toward the little device on the floor, the one I have been trying to fix ever since. I could not save her, but I could save others. So I did. Lyra stood silent. The child in her arms shifted and opened her golden eyes. Elias stared at the baby as if seeing sunlight for the first time. When I saw her in the cages, he said, his voice cracking, she looked like my little girl. I could not leave her there. I carried her through the fire, through the soldiers, through the dark. And when I saw her in your arms, I felt like I had given my daughter back to the stars. His hands trembled as he ran them through his hair. They call me traitor now, he muttered. They will hunt me until I am gone. Lyra stepped closer. The baby reached toward him with tiny fingers. Elias hesitated, then slowly held out his hand. The child wrapped her little hand around his rough finger and cooed softly. For the first time, Elias smiled. It was small and broken, but real. She remembers you, Lyra whispered. She should not, Elias said, shaking his head. She should forget this war. She will not remember the cages, Lyra replied. She will remember you. Silence filled the hollow like a warm blanket. The wind outside howled, but in this place there was only the soft breath of a sleeping child and the faint creak of the old music box. You cannot stay here, Lyra said gently. They are hunting you. I know, Elias said. His eyes darkened. They will find me soon, but I will not run anymore. You do not have to die, she said. Maybe I do, he replied. Lyra's chest tightened. She had come here for answers, but she found grief deeper than she imagined. Elias had given her baby life, but had nothing left for himself. She placed the child in her cradle sling and stepped closer, until she stood right in front of him. Come with us, she said. Elias blinked. Your people would never accept me. They will if they see what I see, Lyra said. A man who crossed the fire to save a life. A man who carries sorrow but still chooses mercy. Elias looked at her for a long moment. The firelight flickered in his tired eyes. He glanced at the baby one last time, then looked away. I will think about it, he said quietly. Lyra nodded. It was enough. She had seen his hidden past, and now she understood. He had saved her child not out of duty, not out of rebellion, but out of love. A love that had survived even the ashes of his own world. She turned to leave, the baby warm against her chest. Behind her, the music box began to play again. Soft and broken, the lullaby echoing through the stone as Elias sat alone among the ghosts of his memories. The path down the northern ridge was silent except for the faint creak of leather straps as Lyra walked. Her baby slept against her chest, safe and warm. Behind her, Elias followed at a distance, his steps slow and uncertain. He had agreed to come, though his eyes had carried the weight of hesitation. Lyra knew the risk. Her people had not forgiven humans for the raids. If they saw him, they might attack without asking why he was there. But she also knew something else. If she left him behind, he would not live long. The soldiers would find his hideout and his name would vanish like smoke. He had carried her daughter out of the cages. Now she would carry him out of the shadows. The sun rose slowly over the broken fields. Golden light spilled across the ruins as they walked. Elias kept his gaze on the ground, his shoulders tense. Lyra glanced at him often, watching the way his eyes flicked to every sound, like a hunted animal expecting the trap to close. "They will not trust me," he said at last, voice low. "They will see the child in your arms," Lyra replied. "They will see the truth." "They will see a human," he said. "They will see the man who brought her home," she answered firmly. They walked in silence after that. By midday, the scattered stones of her village came into view. Small huts curved from pale clay stood in a circle around the central fire pit. Smoke drifted from cooking fires. Children ran through the dust, their laughter bright. But as soon as the first villager saw Lyra approaching with a human behind her, the laughter stopped. Voices rose in alarm. Men grabbed spears. Women pulled their children away. Eyes wide with fear and anger stared from every doorway. Lyra stepped forward, lifting her chin. "He's not an enemy," she called. "He brought my daughter back." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elder Mara, her hair silver and her eyes like sharp glass, pushed to the front. She pointed at Elias with her walking staff. "That one is human," she said. "Their kind took our children." "Why bring him here?" "Because he saved her," Lyra said. She untied her baby from her sling and held her high. "She lives because of him!" Gasps rose from the villagers. Some drew closer, staring at the child with wonder. Others still gripped their spears. Elias stood still, hands open at his sides, showing no threat. Dust clung to his boots. His hollow eyes met no one's gaze. "Why would a human do this?" someone shouted. "Because he once lost his own child," Lyra said. Her voice rang clear. "He crossed fire to give her back to me," the crowd muttered. Elder Mara's gaze softened for only a heartbeat, then hardened again. "He is hunted by his people," she said. "If they find him here, they will bring war." "War will come whether he is here or not," Lyra said. "But if he dies, the only human who showed mercy will be gone." The baby stirred and reached toward Elias with a soft laugh. The sound cut through the tension like sunlight. Tiny fingers stretched for the man who had carried her through the dark. Something in the villagers shifted. Fear cracked just a little. Elias slowly stepped forward. He knelt on one knee and let the baby grasp his finger. She cooed softly, golden eyes bright. The villagers stared. Lyra lowered her voice. "He does not come as a soldier. He comes as a father who lost everything." For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind moved the dust. The fire crackled. At last, Elder Mara lowered her staff. "He may stay until the moon wanes," she said. "But if the soldiers come, he must leave." Lyra bowed her head. "Thank you." The villagers stepped back, allowing her to pass. She led Elias toward her small hut near the edge of the village. Inside, the air smelled of dried herbs and warm clay. She laid her baby in the cradle, now clean and lined with fresh cloth. Elias stood near the doorway, silent. "You do not have to fear them," Lyra said gently. "I fear what follows me," Elias replied. That night, the village was quiet. Most stayed inside, wary of the human in their midst. Lyra sat near the cradle, humming the lullaby. Elias sat across from her, fixing the broken music box under the flicker of a small lamp. The baby stirred and reached toward him. He hesitated, then let her grasp his finger again. A faint smile touched his lips, then faded. Outside, the sound of distant engines rumbled on the horizon. Elias's eyes darkened. "They are coming," he whispered. Lyra's heart clenched. She moved to the doorway and saw faint lights far across the plains, moving closer. "Human soldiers." "They know you are here," she said. "They always know," Elias answered quietly. The baby yawned and nestled deeper into her blankets, unaware of the danger. Lyra turned back to Elias. "Then we will stand together," she said. Elias met her gaze, tired and unsure. But he nodded once. In the heart of the village, under the cold stars, an alien mother and a broken human sat in silence, knowing the world would come for them soon, and knowing they would face it side by side. The night was still when the first engines broke the silence. A low hum trembled through the ground, growing louder with each passing second. Lyra rose from beside the cradle, her heart tightening. Outside the hut, faint lights crawled across the dark plains like fireflies made of steel. Human soldiers were coming. Elias was already standing by the doorway, his jaw set. The broken music box lay forgotten on the floor. He held a worn rifle he had hidden under his coat, though the barrel shook slightly in his scarred hands. "They found me," he said quietly. Lyra's baby stirred in the cradle, sensing the tension. Lyra rushed to lift her into her arms, pressing her close. She turned to Elias. "You will not fight alone," she said. He gave a faint, bitter smile. "Your people will not fight for me." "They will," Lyra replied firmly, "when they see why you fight." Outside, horns blared. The ground shuddered as armored vehicles rolled closer. Villagers ran from their huts, voices rising in fear. Spears and bows were snatched from racks. Smoke from the central fire curled into the starless sky. Elder Mara pushed through the gathering crowd, eyes blazing. "You brought this on us," she shouted at Lyra. "You led the enemy here." "I led hope here," Lyra said. Her voice carried across the courtyard. "And you will not let hope be burned." The villagers hesitated, fear warring with confusion. Elias stepped forward, lowering his rifle. "They came for me," he said, his voice steady. "If I leave now, they may spare you." "They will not spare us," Lyra said. "They will burn what you touched." Engines roared at the edge of the village. Spotlights swept over the huts, blinding and cold. A voice shouted from a loudspeaker, ordering them to hand over the traitor named Elias. Elder Mara gripped her staff. "They will kill us all." Lyra stepped to the center of the courtyard. She lifted her baby high, the child's golden eyes shining in the harsh light. "This child lived because of him," she shouted. "He crossed fire to save her. He carried her from the cages your enemies built." The villagers stared. The baby laughed softly, reaching for Elias. "He did what none of you dared," Lyra said. "He brought life back to our dead cradle. And if you give him to them, you will give away the only piece of mercy left in this world." A hush fell over the crowd. Spears lowered slightly. The baby reached for Elias again, her small fingers opening and closing. Elias's shoulders trembled. He looked down, his face shadowed by pain. The loudspeaker blared again, counting down. Elder Mara stepped forward slowly. She looked at the child, then at Elias. The firelight flickered in her old eyes. "Form the shields," she said. The villagers moved like a wave. Warriors spread in a ring at the village edge, raising curved shields of hardened bone. Archers climbed to the rooftops, bows drawn. Others tipped clay jars of oil into the fire pits. Flames roared to life, casting fierce orange light across the dust. Elias stared in disbelief. "They fight for you," Lyra whispered. "They fight for her," Elias said softly, looking at the baby. The first shot cracked through the night. A spotlight shattered as an arrow struck its lens. Soldiers shouted. Engines surged forward. Bullets tore through the outer huts, splintering wood. The villagers held the line. Shields locked together, spears braced. Arrows rained from the roofs. Fire jars shattered on the ground, bursting into sudden walls of flame. The night roared with chaos. Elias raised his rifle and joined them. He moved like a shadow, covering gaps in the shield wall, knocking soldiers back from the gates. Every step was precise, fierce, desperate. Lyra darted between huts, carrying her baby to the central stone circle. She laid the child in the cradle and wrapped it in layers of blankets, shielding it with her own body. Then she rose, spear in hand, and ran to the fight. Flames lit her eyes as she struck. She fought like the wind, silent, swift, unyielding. Beside her, Elias moved like thunder, blasting through the storm of soldiers. At last, the soldiers began to fall back. Their machines burned. Their commander shouted retreat. Engines roared as they vanished into the night, leaving behind twisted wrecks and the smell of scorched metal. Silence returned slowly, broken only by crackling fire. Lyra dropped her spear and rushed back to the cradle. The baby slept peacefully, untouched by the war around her. Lyra sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Elias stood nearby, chest heaving, blood on his arm. Villagers gathered around, faces stunned. Elder Mara stepped forward, planting her staff in the dust. No human has ever bled for us, she said quietly. Until tonight, she turned to Elias. You are no enemy here. You are one of us. The villagers knelt, lowering their weapons. Lyra lifted her baby from the cradle and placed her tiny hand against Elias's chest. The baby giggled softly. Elias closed his eyes, a faint smile breaking through his weariness. The cradle was no longer empty. It was full of life, full of laughter, full of hope. Lyra whispered, her voice carrying through the quiet village. You gave her back to me, and you gave us all something to believe in. Elias said nothing. He only bowed his head, the stars shining in his tired eyes as the village slowly began to sing the lullaby he had carried through the fire.